Well, justification, of course, well, we haven't heard what the cuts are going to be yet, of course. As you say, it's going to be in July announced, and yes, people might fear that it's going to be the most vulnerable, but is that the case? I don't know at the moment. I'd like to think not. But justification of cuts at all, of course, is that we have to have these cuts for austerity, otherwise we'd be exiting the EU like Greece is about to. If you keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing like we did before, in the same way as a household, if you borrow too much and keep on down the same track, then you're going to end up bankrupt. So we can't have that. And George Osborne to date, of course, has done a good job of getting us back on track. I don't know, as I say, where the cuts are going to be. I'd like to think that they're not to the most vulnerable. And we'll wait and see, and maybe there'll be protests, or this type of protest might be justified or might not, because none of us know till July when he makes those announcements.
So I'd like to go through some of the claims made by the protesters. For example, they say that the NHS is under direct attack, and the government plans to dismantle the NHS and sell it off to private companies to run for profit. What's your response to that?
Well, I think what we've heard in response to that is quite the opposite of that. I think we've heard David Cameron, and he's just been elected on the strength of that he's going to put a lot more money into the NHS, and it will remain as is. So I don't see where that comes from. I think that's speculation that's incorrect, frankly.
So I'd like to move on to the issue of disability welfare. Research by the Centre for Welfare Reform shows that the Conservatives' austerity programme has hit disabled people 9 times harder than average, and those with severe disabilities have been hit 19 times harder. How can the Conservatives justify cuts that impact upon disabled people?
Well, I don't know if those facts are correct. I haven't researched that myself. But if we're hitting severely disabled people, I can't justify that in any way. I don't think that's right. There are other ways to create austerity without harming the most vulnerable. I'd like to see that changed, frankly, if that's the case.
What other ways do you suggest?
Well, fortunately, this isn't a local budget. Well, it is. It will become a local budget thing as well, of course. We do try very hard when we're dealing with our budgets not to harm or inconvenience or disabled or vulnerable people. That's a no-no. That's a high on our agenda as an issue, not to disturb things like that. But nationally, well, I don't know if the facts are correct. Actually, without the statistics, I don't really know whether that's accurate or not. But I wouldn't like to see in any shape or form disabled and vulnerable people being harmed in any shape or form.
So, if you were involved at a national level, what would you like to see happen?
What I'd like to see us get out of Europe, frankly. That would solve a lot of problems. Then we wouldn't have so much austerity in the first place, and we wouldn't have to be making all these cutbacks. We could be a free trading country and earn lots of money for our country, and we'd have all that we need for vulnerable people. But of course, without that, the problem is, as long as we are in Europe, we're going to have austerity. I can't see any other way around it, because the deficit, the amount of money that we pay into Europe and against the amount of money that is returned to us, there's a deficit, and we're not going to make that up. Not without, well, it's almost impossible. I think we can make it better, but we're not going to make it up. For all that, whilst we're in the EU. So as far as I'm concerned, the answer to all this is the up-and-coming referendum, where everybody will have that option and that choice, and all those thousands of people that are going to be marching at the weekend, they need to vote no, and let's opt out and then cut austerity and get back on our own 2 feet and live in the world and earn our own money, which is sort of what we're doing because of national cutbacks locally. That's kind of where we're trying to go, where the leader in Portsmouth is trying to develop more business-like approach to the council so that we earn our own money. which is what's happening with the Spinnaker Tower, of course, at the moment, which I know has become controversial. But at the end of the day, that's money to this city that will stop those cuts into vulnerable people and vulnerable places and what have you. That's what we're doing locally. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, if we could do that nationally, i.e. opt out of the EU and keep that money and make our own money and be more business-like in the world, not just Europe, then that would go a long way to stopping austerity. But I don't think it's going to stop all the time we're in the EU.
Do you think one of the other alternatives might be to tax the rich more and also clamping down on tax avoidance?
Clamping down on tax avoidance, absolutely. Yes, I think that goes without saying. I think if that can be done, of course, and what does that need? It needs more robust chasing of people within the tax office, and probably more people. Now that means you've got to now start employing more people to do that. If that works, that's fine. What was the other part of you? You said clamping down on...
Taxing the rich more.
Taxing the rich, yes. Taxing the rich more. That's always a little bit of a double-edged sword, because I'd love to say, yes, great, as far as I'm concerned, tax the rich. What happens then, though? We start to overtax the rich. The rich say, don't like this country, I'm going to the States. I'm going to Switzerland, or whatever. They'll go somewhere else in the world because they're rich. Because they're rich and they're wealthy people. They've got companies probably all over the world. They can base themselves where they like. So if we're overtaxing them, then we've not got their money in this country, and then we don't have jobs. We don't have investment. So that's a little bit of a, as I say, double-edged sword. So we have to be a bit careful on that one.